All right, so we are continuing on page 46 with being able to factor quadratic trinomials. One thing that we want to bring into this is to remember that we always need to look for the greatest common factor. And so if we look at 2, 18, and 72, then our GCF, greatest common factor, will be 2. And so what that means is that at first here, we're going to have to take and factor out a 2 out of each one of these terms. Okay, now that we've done that, we know that 2 is going to be part of our final answer. We're going to look at this, what is in the parentheses here, the x squared plus 9x minus 36, and see if this can factor any further. And so I'm going to take and draw the box, and I'm going to start by putting in that my x squared is x times x, and then I'm going to put in my negative 36. And remember that a negative 36 means that I'm going to have one positive and one negative factor. And then I'm going to write down my factors of 36. 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. Now, as you were writing them down, if you realize that 3 and 12 were the correct pair of factors, because we can have a positive 12 and a negative 3, and when we add those together, that is going to give us that 9x that we want right here. If you notice that, you don't need to keep listing the factors, but you want to make sure that you have all the factors, that you test all the factors to make sure that you have the correct pair. So if we look at this, I'm going to take my positive 12 and put it here, and then my negative 3 and put it here. Now keep in mind that I just put those in randomly. I could have those reversed. And so this is going to be, when I multiply this times this, it's going to be a positive 12x. And when I multiply this times this is going to give me a negative 3x. And so when I go to combine like terms here, when I go to look at my check here, this is x squared, which is what I wanted it to be. 12x and a negative 3x will be a 9x, which is what we wanted. And then here's our negative 36, which is what we wanted. So that tells me that when I go to write my answer, that I am going to have this factor here, which is x plus 12, and this factor here, which is x minus 3, as my two factors. But I can't forget that I took out that 2. And so I'm going to drop that 2 down as my GCF. And now this is my final answer. All right, so looking at problem number 8, we're going to start with looking and seeing, does this have a greatest common factor? And so if I look between 3 and 21 and 36, the GCF is going to be 3. So I'm going to take and divide each one of these terms by 3. And that'll give me an x squared minus 7x plus 36. Excuse me, plus 12. Forgot to divide that out there. So now I'm going to look just at the quadratic trinomial that is inside of the parenthesis. So I'm going to look at the x squared minus 7x plus 12. And I'm going to take and draw my box. And I'm going to start with my x squared, which I know is x times x. And then I'm going to put in the positive 12. And then I'm going to look at my factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And I am looking to select those to be able to make a negative 7x. And so I'm going to select this pair here because I can make that a negative 3 times a negative 4. And when I add them, those negative 3 and negative 4 will give me a negative 7. So I'm going to put a negative 3 here and a negative 4 there. And now keep in mind I've just placed those. I could have switched the other direction and put the negative 4 here and the negative 3 here. And now I'm going to take and multiply. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. X times a negative 4 is negative 4x. Now let me check. Here's my x squared. There it is. If I take and combine negative 3 and negative 4x, that'll give me negative 7x. And there's my positive 12. So I'm ready to write my answer. And so this will be one of my factors, x minus 3. And here's the other factor, x minus 4. But I have to remember that I took out that GCF, and that has to become part of my answer also. And so this is my final factored answer. And remember, what my goal is that if I multiplied these three things together, that I would end up with this original quadratic trinomial. Let's look at one last problem. All right, so I have 3x squared plus 3x minus 60. So I'm going to start by looking and asking myself, what is the greatest common factor? And the greatest common factor between 3, and 60 is going to be 3. And so I'm going to take and divide everything by 3. And that's going to leave me with x squared plus x minus 20. Okay, so now I'm looking just at that quadratic trinomial. And I'm going to start with the x squared here, which is x times x. And then I'm going to look at the negative 20. A negative 20 tells me when I select my factors, I'm going to need one positive and one negative. Factors of 20, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. And so keep in mind that I am looking to create a plus 1. So if I look at the 4 and 5 here, and I make it a negative 4 and a positive 5, when I multiply those together, it's going to give me a negative 20, which is what I want. But if I take negative 4 and combine it with positive 5, it's going to give me a positive 1, which is what we want up here in the middle term. So I'm going to make this a negative 4. I'm going to make this a positive 5. Once again, I could have put the 5 here and the negative 4 here. And so now I'm going to multiply negative 4 times x, negative 4x, x times 5, 5x. Then I'm going to check. Let's see, this is x squared. There we go. When I combine this right here, Negative 4 and 5x will give me 1x. And there's my negative 20. And so now I'm ready to write my answer. And so my first factor here is x minus 4. And my other factor here is x plus 5. And then I must remember that I've taken out this greatest common factor of 3, and that needs to go in front. And there is my final factored answer for this original quadratic trinomial.